If your skirt never fits properly, the problem usually starts from the pattern. In this video, I'll show you how to draft a basic skirt pattern step by step for every beginner. Okay, this tutorial is for complete beginners and people that draft their skirts but are not able to draft it properly. If this is your first time coming across this channel, you're welcome. My name is Fanny Gregory and I teach beginners how to sew from scratch, from drafting to actually sewing on your fabric. Do not forget to click on the subscribe button, also remember to click on the notification bell so that whenever I post anything, you'll be the first to know. So the very first thing you need to know is that your pattern paper is folded into two, okay? In case you're working on your fabric, also fold your fabric into two. So the first thing I'm going to do right here is to go ahead and place the horizontal lines. But before then, I am going to mark the line I'll be using as my starting line. Just use a ruler and mark a straight line across your pattern paper. So we have our starting line right here, and I'm going to be labeling the starting line my waist line. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to place my other lines, which is my hip line. Okay, my hip line is about 8 inches, so I am going to mark 8 inches right here. And then after that, I'll go ahead and mark the knee length. Now, if you do not know how to take proper body measurements, I have a tutorial on how to take proper body measurements from taking your knee round, taking your knee length, and all of that. Okay, so check the link on the description box for that particular tutorial. So in this case, my knee length is basically about 15 inches. So I'm going to be marking my 15 inches right here. I'm going to be using the rest of the pattern paper as my full length. Now there's something I basically like to do for beginners. Now this is not compulsory, but it is very helpful. Okay, so if you do not have a curve ruler and you want to get your line properly, okay, so the best thing I do is to go to find the upper hip and the lower hip. Doing this will help you draft your curve properly without stress. So in this case, I am going to be using about 3 inches up and 3 inches down. Now this actually depends on how your hip is. If your hip is small, okay, or pointed, you can use about 2 to 2.5 inches. But if you're on the bigger side or your hip is actually round, you can use about 3 inches up. So I'm going to be using about 3 inches up here. And then 3 inches up here. Okay, so this is by 3 inches. So I'm going to mark my 3 inches right here. And I will go ahead and rule a line across these points as so. Like I said, okay, this is actually so you can curve properly. Okay, this is basically so you can curve properly. If you're using a curve ruler, that is perfect. But if you do not have a curve ruler, this method will help you draft your curve the easy way, okay? So now I am going to go ahead and find the dart measurement, okay? Why do we have darts on skirts, okay? If you check from your tummy down to your thigh, okay, the pelvic region is basically inside. So you need something to sit properly there. Without a dart, it will just go like that, okay? So you need your dart to actually put that part inside and sit properly. So in this case, to determine your dart measurement, I'm going to be using my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Like I said earlier, I have a tutorial on how to take proper body measurements. So if you don't know how to take nipple to nipple measurement, do check the link on the description box and you'd get that, okay? So your nipple to nipple is basically from one point of your bust to the other point, all right? So you place your tape as so, whatever you have there is your nipple to nipple measurement. Now you're going to divide what you had there by 2. I had about 7 inches for mine, so I'm going to divide it by 2, which is going to give me about 3.5 inches. So I'm going to use that as my dart line. Now, after marking my 3.5 inches right here, I am going to sustain the line down, okay? So bring the line down to this part that you had your upper hip, all right? So bring your line down to that point. So I'm going to be marking about, this is it. So now we have our dart line. I hope you understand up to this point. Now, after that, from this waistline, I am going to be taking about half an inch on both sides, going out by half an inch. So you place your tape like this and mark half an inch on both sides. This half an inch is how you're going to take your dart, all right? So I'm going to mark from this half an inch right here to this point where my dart line stopped. I'm going to be marking a line to meet up with that. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over on this other side. And then we have our dart line ready. All right, so now the next thing I am going to do is to place the measurement, the round measurement across the pattern paper. Now let's start with the waistline measurement. So for the waistline, I had 28 inches. Divided by 4, I am going to have about 7 inches. Remember that your round measurement is divided by 4, but your dart is divided by 2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and place my 7 inches right here. So this is my 7 inches right here. Now the dart line that you are taking right here, the half an inch you took on both sides, you will need to replace it. The reason you're replacing this is because if you do not replace, once we sew on this, you're going to lose about 1 inch here. So I am going to mark, I'm going to first of all measure how many I took here, and then I will replace it right here. So I have replaced it, and that is what I have. Now we'll move over to the hip line. So let me go ahead and label this so that you will not have, or you will not make mistakes, okay? So this one right here is the upper hip line, and this one right here is the hip line, while this one right here is the lower hip line. And then we have the knee length. So I'm going to be placing my hip measurement on the main hip line right here. And that is going to give me about 9.5 inches, okay? So for my knee, I had about 32 inches. Divided by 4, that is going to give me 8 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark my 8 inches right here, okay? So now after that, the next thing I am going to do on this part right here is to subtract about 1 inch, all right? 1 inch from my main hip, place whatever I have on my upper hip and my lower hip. I hope you're getting. So at this point, I had about 9.5 inches. So I am going to take out 1 inch, which is going to be left with 8.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark my 8.5 inches right here and do the exact same thing over here. All right. So now I have my upper hip, my lower hip. So now at this point right here, I am going to start with drafting my curve, okay? So I will draft my curve right here from this point to meet with this other point. I hope you understand. So now if you notice, we already have our curve ready, okay? So I'm going to be picking from this point to meet up with where I have my upper hip line. All right, so basically this is how it is going to look, okay? So now I am going to take this to meet up with the knee level. So now we have our hip curve right here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and blend this out together, okay? And do the same thing right here. So we basically have our basic line drafted out, because as a beginner, you may not have a pattern curve ruler. So this is what I do for myself. So if you're drafting this on your fabric, please always remember to add about 1 to half inch of allowance so that you can use that to sew, depending on what you want to add, okay? So I am actually done drafting the front. So I'm going to be pulling this straight to meet up with the full length, okay? So basically this is how our skirt pattern looks like. So So after doing this, I'm going to go ahead and I would mark about half inch for my slope, all right? So from this half inch right here, I'm going to connect to this line that we had determined. So this is how it is going to be. Now, the reason you're having this slope is the back pattern has your butt, okay? And your butt is actually very big. So that alone can drag your fabric from the back, okay? So basically, I am going to go ahead and cut this out. Front pattern is ready. The next thing I'm going to do is to draft the back pattern. So for the back pattern, I have my pattern paper also folded into two as so, okay? Just like we did for the front. And then what I'm going to do is to first of all place my pattern paper as so, okay? So we don't have much difference. Now the major thing that is going to be the difference is your zipper area. So I'm going to be taking about 1 inch for my zip allowance. So this is my zip allowance. Now, after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to place my skirts right here. And I'll go ahead and trim it off. But when we reach this point, okay, I will not trim out this. So before then, so that I will not trim out the slope that we made, I am going to go ahead and draw a line, okay? A starting line from where we have my waistline. And that is going to be straight. So I basically have my starting line right here, which actually means that I will not be trimming the slope out, okay? So I'll go ahead and I'll place my pattern paper and I'll just trim it off as so. Then after that, on this part right here, I will just follow the straight line. And then we have my back pattern and also my front pattern. Basically, this is how it is for drafting your very first skirt pattern. This is actually very simple and it's something you can actually do on repeats. Once you do it like once or twice, you'll be able to do it better, okay? In subsequent tutorial, I am going to teach you how to stitch these skirts together. Now, if this tutorial was actually helpful to you, do not forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the notification bell so that whenever I post any tutorial, you'll be the first to see. And if you also want to learn how to take proper body measurements and every other beginner series, I have them on my channel. You can check that out. See you in the next tutorial. Bye.